A lot of you probably need more ego. How's that for a spiritual turnaround? And what I mean by that is a lot of us are so hard on ourselves that we don't see ourselves as worthy or powerful enough to do the thing that we came here to do. We've learned through patchworking different spiritual teachings together, new age teachings, this, that, and the other, that the ego is the enemy and that we should dissolve it. In most traditions, the process of removing your ego and dismantling yourself actually is meant for the later stages of your life. It's considered like the sage era of your life. Think about it like this. When you're born, you're coming out of source. You're coming out of oneness consciousness, whatever that is. You're in that primordial kind of womb-like state. Then you're born. Then you work very hard to push away from that state and separate yourself from that and become a sovereign individual. That's what a baby's doing when it attempts to walk or attempts to identify itself. It's pushing away from that and trying to become something solid. And then that person starts to develop across time. And when you do that, you lose the connection to the primordial oneness, right? You lose that kind of benevolent nature, womb, mother state, and you enter this much more difficult world where you're kind of an individual in opposition or trying to carve out a life for yourself among everything else and everyone else. And nature can kind of become an enemy in a sense. But you need that in terms of a maturation process where you're developing an ego. You're maturing into an individual. And that part of the process is actually very, very necessary. Psychologically, it's necessary as well. And until you mature that part of yourself fully, you don't really move to the next phase where you then decide to dismantle all of it again and you go back to oneness. What's interesting is that a lot of teachings jump to that phase and they talk about how your ego is bad and you should be dismantling and removing any sense of separation and all of that kind of stuff. The problem with that is that if you haven't fully matured and developed in the first place, what the hell do you think you're dismantling? You're still developing. You shouldn't be dismantling and developing at the same time. Until you've fully developed, you shouldn't be dismantling. You should be developing. Those are two different things. And a lot of people start to dismantle themselves actually out of a way of avoiding the effort and work it takes to develop and mature yourself. In fact, in this idea, most people don't actually ever get there because you can't jump it. So until you fully have matured as a sovereign individual, you can't go to that phase yet. And it comes way later. And that's a lot of showing up, right? That's a lot of, I'm going to develop who I am across time in a way that is mature, sovereign, functional, healthy, skilled. And I'm going to separate out of all the potential I could be and actually really just become something in someone. And what's cool about that, this is my favorite part though. That's a lot of dedication. It's a lot of effort, right? It's a lot of things to become that, especially to become it when you've also separated from the initial conditioning and you become who you really want to be. It's not just you develop as your conditioning and be that. You actually heal out of that and then become who you really are and then develop that. So when we're talking about development, we're talking about development as who you truly want to be, who your soul truly came here to be, that type of development. And then the dedication and the skill and the showing up on a daily basis that it takes to actually manifest that. You need the confidence, you need the sense of self, you need the identity, you need a bit of ego to feel capable to do something amazing in this world. And that's actually a good thing, because in the absence of that, you don't feel good enough, worthy enough, powerful enough, special enough, whatever, to help anybody or do anything. Like all of that holding myself back because I'm not good enough. Who is that helping? Nobody. You actually need some of that, a healthy dose of that. And a lot of us could use a bit more, especially if we're the people pleasing or the energetically sensitive, I put other people first, everyone comes above me type of energy. And then you get handed, by the way, a spiritual teaching that says, well, you should be egoless and humble anyways. And anytime you think you're good, anything good about yourself, that's your ego. And a lot of emotionally sensitive people use those types of teachings to just bring themselves down even farther. Every time I start to feel confident, I smash myself down with spiritual teachings that say I should be humble. Every time I start to feel good about myself, I tell myself that's my ego and I smash myself down. Every time I want to set boundaries I tell myself that's my ego. I should be unconditionally loving, and I remove my own boundaries. None of that is very healthy, and it's not going to help you get where you're going. Save those teachings for the future, and in the meanwhile, develop some self-confidence, some worthiness, some identity. Aligned with your heart, that will just help you serve the world. If you're aligned with your heart, then give yourself your power. Another way to put it would be you need a less self-defeating ego, because there's two types of kind of ego structures. One is narcissistic, classic, when we think about a big ego. But the other entire structure is the entire ego is designed to self-defeat yourself. And, you think like, oh my God, I'm afraid of my greatness because what if I get a big ego? That voice is your ego. The one who's constantly critiquing and shutting yourself down, that actually is your ego. And people get it flipped around and they think that that's like the good in them trying to keep themselves in check. That actually is the ego structure. It's a self-defeating ego structure. And it's the thing that's just constantly smashing you down from your own greatness. Understand that the cost of fully developing yourself is a sacrifice of a sense of freedom and a sense of possibility. Because as you decide to become something, you also sacrifice everything else that you might be. So, if you decide to get in a long-term committed relationship, for example, you decide to fall in love and get married and try to actually make it work, what do you sacrifice to make that happen? The potential of all other partners. That's the sacrifice. That's the cost. If you decide to spend all of your time becoming a particular profession, what do you lose? The capacity to potentially become anything else. But if you don't choose, you become nothing. All potential, nothing manifested. That doesn't work. In the process of that, you lose your sense of freedom because the dedication it takes to become that is difficult. It puts a lot of constraints on yourself. There's a lot of sacrifice. It requires a lot of discipline, right? So imagine that if I want to play the guitar, the second I start playing the guitar, what do I bump into? A structure that I keep bumping into wrong notes. And I have to constrain my sense of freedom to learning how to get it right, learning how to get it right, learning how to get it right. And it's slow and it's arduous and it's difficult. And there's that point where you're being pressured and losing all freedom. But it's like that pressure that ultimately becomes a diamond, right? It's transforming you through that process into the other side where true freedom emerges. The freedom of a musician who can jam freely up and down the neck. That came from the constriction in the first chapter of learning. Then something else opens up on the other side, and then creativity emerges. If you want to be a dancer, first you're conflicted and constrained with your movements, but then eventually those movements open up into something fluid and something new emerges, and then you're free to dance spontaneously and freely and co-creatively. You have nothing but time, by the way. You have so much time to master all different types of things. And the more that you wake up and free yourself and you realize that this isn't very serious, a large part of the fun becomes how many things can I master? How many experiences can I have? Or at least how far can I run in one direction based on something that excites me? Like how much could I serve the world? I don't know how much you could serve the world. It depends on how much you go on your journey. You don't know how deep the path goes until you start taking steps in that direction and answer the call of your adventure and master the skills necessary along the way. But if you keep following it, we have no idea what's possible over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's the only real thing that will fulfill you, as far as I can tell. Matt Kahn talks a lot about that as well. He says it's the only thing that will ever truly personally satisfy you is to go on the adventure that your soul is calling you towards. It's the only thing that goes deep enough. Everything else will be shallow by comparison. And you'll be haunted by the deep down part of you that knows that there's a deeper calling and it will never leave you. Last thing I want to point out, as you're developing your character and you're deciding who am I going to be and who to aim at, who's my ideal. It could be a future version of yourself. It could be people you admire. It could be deities and religious structures, because that's where we get a lot of that from. But as you're deciding who am I aiming at, you can also consider what ways of being help you win whatever game you want to play. So for example, if you want to be an artist, there are certain characteristics that you could cultivate that will help you win that game. Maybe it's flow. It's definitely discipline, because it's a lot of skill, creativity, openness. There's a lot of things that help an artist thrive. Any game that you decide to play, there are certain ways of being that will help you win that game. But then even above that, there's a set of characteristics that help you win many games at once or all games. And if you understand those and make those your ideal, then you understand why it's important to cultivate them. So for example, would we agree that being an honest person is a good thing? Yes, everyone knows that. Inherently, we know that, and we could dive in deep as to the underpinnings of why we all know that. But a really simple version is being honest helps you win every game you decide to play in life. It's always useful across all games. Relationships, friendships, career, artistic pursuits, anything you do, honesty will be useful. And so the cultivation of being honest as part of your character development is like a meta win. It helps you win everything. And that's why it's so useful. Discipline. Would we agree that being disciplined is a good thing? Part of the reason why discipline's so good is that if you become a disciplined person, you win every game you want to step into. You need discipline to thrive in a relationship. You better believe it. You need discipline to thrive if you're going to be successful with money, finances, career, creative pursuits, pretty much everything you want to do, discipline's going to be useful. What's cool about that as well is that that means that if you pick a route that practices discipline, any discipline you choose, it's not just that you get disciplined at that thing, it's that you practice being the type of person who is disciplined. And that is a meta win because you cultivate how to be disciplined with your meditation. It's going to help you be disciplined with exercise. You do that. That's going to help you have discipline when it comes to your inner work or career or relationship. You're cultivating a way of being. And that is actually what's the most important thing. What are a couple of other things, characteristics, ways of being that you would notice help you thrive in any area of life, or at least most areas of life?
Bravery.
Yeah, bravery for sure. Willingness to be a fool, right? You're always a fool in the beginning of every new endeavor. So the willingness to be a fool is really important, to have that courage, that bravery. Especially, by the way, people get stuck in their roles because it tends to be very uncomfortable to step into the unknown and be a fool. And so if you've mastered a couple of domains, the tendency to build your life around those domains and not want to step out of it ever again is very high. And so that's why people get good at a couple of things. They build their life around those things, then they don't start over being new again, which can lead to a very boring life ultimately, because you could be so much. But part of it's the fear of, yeah, but if I choose a new career path, if I start a new artistic endeavor, I'm back at the bottom again. And I've worked so hard to get to the top of a couple domains. But maybe those domains aren't your passion, or maybe you're bored of them, or maybe, maybe you want new things. Maybe your life, there's pieces missing. And in order to step out again, you have to fall in love with, great, I'm going to be an idiot again. So one thing you could do after this call, if you want, is have a look at what, in your own opinion, are like the top 5 that help you thrive in as many areas as possible based on your own estimation. If you want to know who to be and who to aim at, just take those characteristics. And although you might know them on a certain level, the understanding of why they're valuable is that it helps you thrive in life across multiple domains, and developing that helps you succeed at life.